The first thing we need to review before we get to the work cited is, come on you, it was working before, you suck. Yeah, it's fun. That's not my computer. Technical difficulties, we'll work them out. The school gave us these great computers. But the USB ports break. Okay, so we're going to talk about MLA formatting, just the basics of formatting. I've sent out the sample fiction essay. There's also an extra credit quiz that goes along with the sample fiction essay. That's for both my in-class and web courses, so you can complete that before the paper is due for a few points of extra credit. But not only that, you get to see what an assignment for this class looked like. Now, first and foremost, we have to change the font to Times New Roman 12-point font. The default is going to be Calibri 11. And make sure you're doing that on your last name and page number as well, okay? And I know it's small, but I put it in the actual 12-point font, in the actual Calibri 11, just so you can see what they look like and what the difference is. All right, use the default margins. They're either going to be 1 inch all the way around, or they're going to be 1 on the top and bottom and 1 1/4 on the sides. Okay, upper left corner of the first page. We need the following: your name, instructor name, class, and the date. And I know it's an easy mistake to make, but don't write Davis Willis. It drives me nuts. Who would name their kid something that dumb? Yes, Dr. Willis works. Although my father, brother, and grandfather, their middle name is Larimer. Larimer, it's a family name. So my father's a junior, so he goes by Larry. Yeah. This is what it's going to look like in the upper left-hand corner of the page. Your name, instructor name, class, and the date. Also notice there's no extra space between the date and the title, or the title and the start of the paper. We also indent either 1 tab or 5 spaces on every paragraph. There's a teacher in the area, and I don't know where they're teaching in high school, that tells students not to indent the first line, and I really wish I could throw a water balloon at that person because it's become an issue. So your name, instructor name, class, and the date, no extra space. Title, no extra space. Start the paper. In the upper right of every corner, now this stuff is just on the first page. In the upper right on every corner, your last name and page number, and then the title has certain rules. It needs to look like the rest of the paper, okay? So there's no quotes, there's no bold, no underline. Now, if you have the story title or a short works title in your title, like characters in Jackson's The Lottery, you would have the lottery in quotes, but the title overall is in the same font size as the rest of the paper. Questions on that? All right, so in the upper right-hand corner of every page, your last name and page number. I've put the instructions on how to do that in Word in here. If you're using another word processor, I don't really know how to do it. And do keep in mind, if you're using something like a .pages file or a Google Doc, you do need to transition that file into a PDF or a Word file before you turn it in. Turnitin does not like other file types besides Word or PDF or RTF, okay? That's all in the syllabus, but just as a refresher. This is what it's going to look like. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the author's last name, page number. Notice it's in Times New Roman 12-point font, just like the rest of the essay. We have the title centered, but it's just the normal double space, okay? And this is the formatting for all of your papers, okay? Now, in 102, one of the things you do have to take note of is the first paper, if you make some mistakes on formatting, I will tell you what you need to correct. But by the second paper, I'm not going to grade the essay unless it's correctly formatted. And you'll get a late penalty if I get the correctly formatted version late. So do please make sure you're putting in an effort to do this correctly on the first paper, because then if you make some mistakes, you can correct them by the second paper. Okay? Questions on that? All right, one thing in all my classes I ask is that you eliminate the second person from all writing. For composition classes, the first paper you get no higher than a C on grammar and mechanics. Second paper no higher than a D. Third paper and the rest of the papers, that includes the final, you get no higher than a 59% on grammar and mechanics. Now, you can use the second person if you're quoting the text, that's fine, or you're quoting your sources. But in your writing, I want you to eliminate you, your, and yourself. Okay? Questions on that? We don't need to worry about my literature classes, but I will post this for my literature classes. It's just an automatic 60% on grammar and mechanics for second person. Just because you're in your third semester at minimum, you know, you should know how to follow directions by then. All right, so here's a sample works cited page, which we're going to get into with the next PowerPoint here in just a second, but just some basic formatting rules. The title is centered, just like the title of the paper. It's not in bold, it's not underlined, it's not in quotes. It starts at the top of a new page, okay? It's alphabetized by what the citation starts with. It's double-spaced just like the rest of the paper. The second and subsequent lines of each citation are indented. Okay, I have sent out a video that shows you how to format an MLA works cited page. I think it's in the announcements tab this semester. That will show you how to do this in Word. And if you're used to using another word processor, you do have Word available to you through your Office 365 account, which you get your email from. Okay, so alphabetized, reverse indented, and the title is centered, and it's the same as the rest of the paper. Works cited starts at the top of a new page. Okay? Questions on that? Okay, at the beginning of that file I sent out to everybody with chapter 19 and 20 from the English 101 book, I have posted the online writing lab at Purdue's correctly formatted MLA paper, which you can use to your advantage because you can kind of use it as a checklist as you're putting together your final draft. It's not much to print out. I would recommend you print out those first few pages, or you can go to this link and just get the file. All right. All right, so we're going to shift gears and go to how do we put together a works cited page. Now, this takes practice. I don't think I've ever written a paper without a handbook with me. Nobody memorizes this stuff, but I'm trying to give you the resources since we don't require an extra book to buy. We used to, before the merger, require that you buy a grammar book for 101, 102, and then the literature classes. It was an extra $65, which is a little bit too much, especially when we have online style guides, and I provided you with these pages from the 101 book. And since the 101 book's a new edition, the copy that I made is a new edition. I've put the correct page numbers. Okay, so let's talk about the basic rules of in-text citations. As a refresher from 101, You have to cite the source in 2 places. Where are those 2 places? In the text, after every sentence that comes from a work outside of your own. So every sentence that comes from a source if you're paraphrasing, and then on the works cited page. I know some people think that you just need to cite at the end of the paragraph, but that's not sufficient because the reader cannot tell the difference between your ideas and the ideas that come from the sources if you don't cite every sentence. Now, if you're quoting, you just need to cite at the end of the quote. Okay? So here are the basic rules for in-text citations. If you have it, author's last name and page number. Okay? However, a lot of internet sources don't have a page number. So if you just have an author, you list the author in the parentheses. If you don't have an author listed, title of the article or title of the website, not the URL. And here's a difference. Let's go with the bank I use. Okay, I know you can't see it too well on the video, but top one's a URL, www.bofa.com. Okay, let's hear the D's. No? Okay, good. Yeah, there we go. Just making sure you're paying attention. The second one, Bank of America, is the title of the website. That's what you would go with, okay? The title of the website or title of the article, not the web address. All right, so if you don't have a title of an article, you just use the title of the website, okay? Either's really fine if you don't have an author. And in 102, most of your sources are going to have an author if they're discussing the text, because we're not using things like eNotes, lit charts, easy 1, 2, 3 help me, all those crap sites. We're not using those. So they're going to have an author listed. Also, something that's become popular over the last couple of years are apps that take an essay someone buys on the internet and then changes all the words for you just enough to avoid Turnitin. Well, guess what? Turnitin's caught up with that now. I just had an issue in another class. So do your own work, cite your sources. There's not going to be a problem. All right. So what I like about the English 101 textbook is it breaks what you should have in a citation into its components, okay? And they're going to be the same regardless of the type of source you have. So whether you have a book, whether you have a magazine, an online publication, an article on a website, they're all going to use this pattern, okay? I don't want you to memorize it, but know where to look it up. And those components are the author, the title of the source, title of container, other contributors, version, number, publisher, publication date, and location. And you use this list even if you don't have all this information. Say you have an article that doesn't have an author. Then you start the citation with the title of the source. And you move on to the next thing that you have, and so on. Okay? And this is going to be starting on page 474 of that handout I emailed out yesterday. So, first few components, author, title of the source. What is the author? It's the person or people who wrote or otherwise created the work. I would encourage you to avoid things like YouTube editors or I think Britannica tells you to put the editors of Britannica. Just start with the article title rather than with that. So you got something from Britannica on the Titanic. We don't have an author, so we start with the next thing. Title of the source, Titanic. Article is probably HMS Titanic. What does HMS stand for? His Majesty's ship or steamship. Because there was a king at the time. Which would be the current monarch's grandfather, I believe. Or maybe great-grandfather. What? Well, she wasn't around in 1912. My great-grandmother remembers the Titanic because she took a boat from Cornwall in England to Canada in 1913 as a 13-year-old and was scared to death because the Titanic had just sunk the year before. All right, I'm digressing. Title is the title of the specific article, okay? And articles, like other short works, are in quotes. Longer works, like full-length plays or books, are going to be in italics. And I can't write italics, so use your imagination. All right. Come on. There we go. So we have the author, title of the work. So if we were, for example, it would be Hemingway, Ernest, quotation mark, hills like white elephants, end quote. Now we need the container. What is it contained in? In the case of our textbook, it would be Perrine's literature. But a container is going to be the larger source containing what you are citing. So this could be a website, this could be an anthology. If you're looking at a journal article, it would be the journal, whatever this article is in. So when you're citing within a book, the container's a book. For an episode of a TV show, it's the series. So the one where Monica makes Thanksgiving, that's in quotes. Friends, italic. You guys your generation is going back to Friends, right? Maybe? Kind of? Okay. I was late to Friends, but like a lot of people in high school watched it. It was like destination television. I'm like, eh. I did watch Beverly Hills 90210 because the girls in my classes in middle school would be talking about it the next day, so I would watch it so I'd have something to talk about with them. No, chubby, poofy-haired idiot is what I was in middle school. Thank God for ninth grade football. Okay, so here's an example of a book. Steps for writing well with additional readings. That's your English 101 textbook. For the 102, it would be Perrine's literature. Television show would be something like NCIS. Website, Purdue University. A journal or a periodical would be the Shakespeare Quarterly, Pensacola News Journal, something like that. So here's an example. Go ahead and look, since you're 102, at page 358 of your textbook and tell me who the author is, what the title is, and what the container is. And of course, if you're watching this in the future 101 class, you can go to 673. Okay, so who is the author? John Updike. What is the title? A&P. And what's the container? Perrine's literature, structure, sense, and sound. Okay, make sure you get the whole title in there. Yep. Okay, so here is what it would look like in the English 101 textbook. That's the E.B. White story, Once More to the Lake. For our purposes, we have author's last name, comma first, A&P, title of the container. Next, we're going to have the editors, edited by Greg Johnson and Thomas Arp. Actually, that should be a capital E. My apologies. What's that? Oh, yeah, this would be an awfully long story. Like I said, before class, I was rushing to get the proper page numbers in there. So, okay, I guess I'm dyslexic, apparently. Like they're going back in time. All right, well, we move on. That's actually 358 to 363, not 538. All right, so we have the author, the title of the work, what it's in. Now, other contributors. Who else put this source together? So noteworthy contributors to the work that are not listed in element 1, which is the author. These may include editors, a translator, perhaps a performer. If you're, once we get to drama, you might actually use a play that's on YouTube. Well, if you're using a speech, you have to put the actor in there. Introduce each name or set of names with a description of the role they played. So, for example, edited by Gene Wyrick, which is the editor of the English 101 book. Perrines is Johnson and Arp. Or you can see at the bottom there, translated by Mary Barrows. She did a really wonderful translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight about 20 years ago. Also, after we have other contributors, and you're not always going to have other contributors. Remember, you go down that list, and if you don't have something, you move on to the next one. Version. So this is a description of a source that appears in more than one version. In the example of this book, what version is it? Look at the front and tell me for the English 102 book. 13th edition. So, this element appears most frequently in books that appear in multiple editions. But you can also have like the director's cut. Like, for example, if you were using Justice League, there is the original theatrical release, and then there's the more recent Snyder cut, which they're both disappointing, to be honest. It's just saying the battery's low. It's lying, I hope. All right, basic parts of works cited, the number. So we have other contributors, version, and the number. This indicates a source's place in the sequence. So for example, it could refer to the volume of a book, the issue number of a journal, season or episode of a TV show, okay? This will pop up mostly with journal articles and TV shows, okay? The next step is the publisher. What is a publisher? This is whoever delivers it to the public. So in the case of this book, it's Cengage Publishing. Publishers should not be listed for periodicals, works published directly by the author, websites for which the publisher's name is the same as the title. So example, if you're quoting something from CNN, you wouldn't put CNN as the publisher or Time Warner. I'm not even sure who owns them anymore. But if it's the same as the title of the website, you don't need to put it twice. Publishers should be listed for books, films, television shows, and most websites, but not all. So here's an example, and this is actually from the English 101 book that I sent out to everybody. Author's last name, first name, title of the article, 5 ways to avoid germs while traveling. Ironic that this came out way before the pandemic. Title of the website, container, contributor, number or date, then where we get it, the URL, location. Yes?
Earlier you just said not to use bfa.com, but here you put cnn.com.
Because that's the actual title of the website.
Okay, so you wouldn't just put CNN.
Correct, because if you say CNN, you're referring to a television program.
Okay.
So in this case, you actually have to differentiate. Isn't it fun? And if you just put CNN here in italics, I'd be fine with it, okay? While I'm expecting these to be mostly perfect, tiny little errors like that, I'm not going to get too wound up about. And it doesn't necessarily tell you to do this at the end on every style guide, but please put the date accessed at the end so I know if I go to look at your article and it's been updated, I know where it's different. So here we have author, title, container, publisher, date it was last updated, location, and then the date access. All right, so after the publisher, we want the publication date. When did it come out? This could mean when a work was published or republished in print or online. When it was released in theaters, iTunes, broadcast on TV, or performed live. So if it's just the year, it's going to be like 2014. Typically in a book, it's in the first couple of pages with the copyright information on it. In the case of the 102 book, it's 2018, okay? But it might be, the original broadcast date if it's a television show. Or in the case of, let's go back to Friends, toward the end of that show, their episodes started being like 40, 42 minutes rather than a half an hour. So you would have to differentiate your version. Did you use the original TV version or did you use the edited version? Location, that's the data access. Where to find a specific source for a print, or excuse me, not the data access, the URL. I have to look this stuff up too, folks. I write essays periodically. I have the same grammar book, and I've been doing this for 20 years plus. Where to find a specific source. For a print source, location by page number. So remember on the earlier example, we had the page numbers that I screwed up on A and P. That's the location in the book. This is all designed so somebody can go look up your sources, okay? For an online source, provide the URL or DOI. I still don't know what DOI stands for, but it's an exact location. Or the location of a live performance, disc number, or number in a DVD set. For example, if you have a DVD set and it's Friends 4th season, disc 4, then you would indicate disc 4. Okay? So it might be a URL like coastalalabama.edu/students, the page. Now, if you just have one page, it's P period. If it's multiple pages, it's 2 P's, because I don't want to say PP, and a period. I'm still a 12-year-old at heart. Now, to get a directory in that file that I gave to you of examples of the various types of citation, page 479 of the English 101 book, okay? You can say, okay, I have a website with one author. You can look down that table of contents, find which one you want, and you can go to the page that has your example. To me, this is a better way to do it than just putting it into something like Citation Machine, which I don't mind because you still have to check it for accuracy. Because if you do it this way, you're probably going to get it more correct than Citation Machine. Because Citation Machine, you still have to enter the information correctly for it to come out correct. So why not just do it yourself? Also in that packet I gave you, it has a Sample MLA Works Cited page. That essay from OWL Purdue at the beginning of the file also has an example Works Cited page with comments in the margins. I think there's one on the sample fiction essay, but I don't remember for sure. Okay, just a final thought. Remember that this takes time. I still have to look stuff up to do it correctly. You don't have to memorize it. You just have to know where your resources are to do it correctly. Use a textbook, Writing Lab at Purdue, other resources to help with you. If you're planning on getting a 4-year degree, once you get to upper division classes, instructors will just say, use APA, use MLA, use Chicago style. And then they're going to expect you to do it correctly. My wife at Southern Miss, she had a psychology professor that would go straight to the reference page If it wasn't right, put a 0 on the paper and go to the next one without even reading the paper. It does happen. So you need to make sure that you have this skill set to be able to do this. If you work hard to get this stuff right, the worst that will happen is you'll have to revise your paper. For English 102, I mean, I have a little bit higher standard, but in the first paper, I'll focus a little bit more on telling you what you need to fix. However, I do expect adherence to the approved research material policy. Okay, that's from day one. I'll work with you on correcting works cited pages if you need help or you're putting in a good effort, but I do insist you follow that approved research material policy in the syllabus. And you can't even open the fiction essay without reading it, so you should know it. Above all, only a very few academic types memorize this stuff, so people will struggle with it. It's okay to use resources. Just make sure you're putting in the effort to cite correctly. Okay? Any questions? All right, well, let me save the video before time runs out.